if you want to create your own extensibility, and you want Copilot to talk to your in-house application and your in-house database, how would you go about that? Because these are all available out of the box for you to start using today. If that is something that's of interest to you, I'd invite Satya to walk you through that a bit more in terms of how extensibility actually works under the hood, and what are those components and how and why you should take specific approaches depending on your use case. Hey,
Thank you.
Satya.
Thank you, Harish. And can you confirm if you're able to see my screen well?
Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
okay.
Yeah, like Harish mentioned, I think you have a bunch of out-of-box plugins that you can use at your disposal. Like Deep showed, there is a Works with Copilot option where you can see in our App Store the current apps that have Copilot plugin capabilities, right? But you would also have a lot of in-house homegrown systems that you would have invested in, that you would have nurtured within your organization, that's very customized to your business workflows, your business systems, and so on. So for those, you might want to build a way to interact or get those information systems talking to Copilot. That's where I think the custom plugins or custom Copilot extensibility comes into play. In order to understand how this works, I would want to take a little bit of a overall picture view to understand how Copilot works. This might be a slide that you would have seen earlier as well, but I wanted to start here because this really gives a good picture of how Copilot works internally when you ask it a question, and then where do our extensibility fits in. When we build something where we want to extend how Copilot works, we'd want to understand first the picture of how Copilot itself works, right? That's why I wanted to start here. I'll move to this quickly because this might be a area that most of you would have seen already. If not, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me anywhere. Right. So you have this central Copilot that sits across multiple product surfaces. That's what you see in the here in the center. Whenever a user asks a question, hey, bring me information related to my Jira tickets, or what was the recent ticket assigned to me, right? Like these kind of questions that you ask Copilot, right? This is first sent to the central Copilot service, and that's the first step that happens. Next, Copilot will need to understand when you say me, assigned to me, who are my colleagues, like give me frequent documents that I have visited or trending documents around me. So those kind of things Copilot will need to resolve for, like who does me refer to? Who are the people that I frequently work with? What are the files, documents, emails that I have access to? So in order to do that, Copilot will have to talk to graph and semantic index, where it has information around things around me, things that I have access to, and also information about me to make the results personalized and customized to me, right? So that's something that Copilot does, kind of like a prerequisite step before a pre-processing step as soon as it gets a question from the user. At this stage, in addition to Graph, if you have a plugin, if you have built something that talks to an external system, Copilot will also check, does this question need information from a CRM, right? Does this question that my user asked, does it need some information from Jira or any of the other plugins that I currently have at my disposal? So that's the thinking that Copilot does at this stage. And if it feels like, yes, I need some information from this plugin, it calls that plugin at this stage to get that information from the plugin. So in the pre-processing stage itself, the plugin, the extensibility that you build comes into play. And Copilot kind of like, it's kind of like a person referring a book in the library. Copilot refers a plugin to check for information that it doesn't know by itself, right? This is something that happens in step two. Once it has all the content, like user asks the question, it refers certain books, it refers plugins, it refers your emails, it refers your chats. Now Copilot feels, okay, I have enough information to answer the user's question, but I needed to frame it in a good way before I send it back to the user. At this stage, Copilot will send it to the LLM. So basically, there is an Azure OpenAI LLM that Copilot works with. So it sends it to the LLM, which, as you all know, abides by our responsible AI principles. So at this point in time, the LLM gets all the information that Copilot has, along with the information that your plugin, semantic index, anything else that would have provided to augment the single question that you would have asked, right? Everything gets sent to the LLM at this point in time. And then LLM sends a response back to the Copilot, which is again going into a step of post-processing, right? This post-processing that you see over here, the compliance and purview, is more from a compliance perspective. Like the information that gets sent is, something that is valid to be shown to the user. It's something that they only have access to. It abides by the compliance policies of the organization. All of that will come into play over here in kind of in a post-processing step, and only if it passes that, it gets sent back to the user as a final response, right? This is in a nutshell how Copilot works when you ask a single question. If you do not build, if you have no extensibility in place, you haven't really built any plugins, or you haven't connected any graph connectors, or you haven't enabled any third-party plugins like Deep showed, then this bots would not be there. Copilot will work within the boundary of M365, like whatever is within the M365 world, which is probably like your emails, your chat, your documents that you have in your SharePoint and all that. So it has access to those knowledge content, and it will be able to answer your questions based on whatever it knows over there, right? That's the idea. And once you see this diagram, it kind of is very clear, right? Like uh, in a real world, like I think Harish alluded to earlier, our work touches information, content, and workflows in systems outside of Microsoft 365, right? Rarely do you stay within just this boundary that you see over here. Imagine a very simple sales call, right? You might want to look up a customer in a CRM somewhere externally that doesn't sit in M365. Once you find a particular customer opportunity in that CRM, you might want to refer to your SharePoint documents and emails, which is in M365. So you're jumping from outside to inside once. And once you have all this information, you might want to build a very visual presentation or whiteboard, for which you might need a mural, which is again going to jump out of M365. So a single call with the customer, or with the customer that you would want to pitch, do a sales pitch to, you're jumping between multiple different systems, right? And I think if you have been following the world of AI, the improvements that are coming up over there, an LLM is going to be as brilliant and as useful to you as to the data and content that you provided to. So the more information that you give, you give an LLM about your business process, about your needs, about your requirements, about how your world is, right? The more the LLM will be able to customize and personalize its responses and its capabilities to your world, and it becomes that much more useful for you. Like that's where the value is, right? Like otherwise you have a standard offering, standard LLM that gives you good responses, but then it doesn't go the extra mile of being very much personalized to your world, right? That's where extensibility is critical, and that's where custom extensibility also comes in. So I think this was covered very well by Harish, so I'll probably skip this. But I think the important point over here is you have multiple different surface areas in which you can access Copilot. But behind that, you have a language model, a graph, and a set of apps that you saw in the earlier slide that orchestrates all of this in whichever endpoint you speak with. So something that you build as a plugin is going to be available across multiple surfaces for people to access and talk to. And it all comes back to the same infrastructure in the backend. So how does all of this work, right? Like I said, what users interact with, the UX layer, you have multiple endpoints. Now, within Copilot, there are a certain out-of-box things that it allows users to do. For example, right now, you can ask it to read an email, you can upload a Word document, you can ask it to summarize. You can even ask it to give a critical review. Hey, this is my product spec. Do take a critical review and see if I have missed any paragraphs, any important points, any risks over here. So you can ask it to do summarization, text, back and forth, text-wise reasoning, text-wise generation as well. You can ask it to even write a poem if that's something that you are interested in. You can ask it to translate. Like you can give it a very much an English transcript of a meeting, and you would want to translate in your native language. You can ask it to translate to Spanish, English, so any of the supported languages. So all of this language tasks, summarization, all of this is something that we call as skills. That's something out of box that comes to you right now, right? In addition to that, there is also a certain set of knowledge that Copilot has access to, right? Like I mentioned, it has access to M365 Cloud, right? So if you think about it, if you are extending Copilot, you can extend it across these two parameters, right? Like there are these two dimensions or parameters, however you want to call it. One is what it can do. So you can extend it to teach it more skills, to teach it to do more things. When I say more things, think of asking it to create a whiteboard drawing, asking it to create a presentation, asking it to create a search and find a ticket in Jira is actually a skill, right? Like it needs to understand what Jira is. It needs to understand how to search Jira. So that's a skill. So asking it to do something outside of what it has been trained to do so far is something that you are teaching it a new skill. And that's one way of extending Copilot. The other way of extending Copilot is I'm okay with the skills that you have, but I want you to have access to more knowledge or content, right? So you are imparting more files, more information to Copilot's reach. So even with the current skills, it can reason over more information data. That's another way of extending Copilot. Right? These are the two dimensions that we have: skills and knowledge. And let's see what are the pieces that we have to enable both these type of extensions, right? On the skills side, we have something called as plugins. You can build plugins that essentially allows you to teach Copilot to do new things, right? That's on the one side. On the other side, you have something called as Microsoft Graph, graph connectors, using which you can funnel information from an external system, be it your file repository. It could be some kind of like a bunch of PDF files, documents that you have. You can funnel the information, take the information, make a copy of it, and bring it into the semantic index. So Copilot also now knows this information. So you can either expand the knowledge or expand the skills. To expand the knowledge, you go with graph characters. To expand the skills, you go with plugins, right? Now, this is at a high level, but what do these usually mean? Like, and when should I choose which approach, right? Like, that's a question that you might have at this point in time, right? Let's park that question for now. I will probably show you a few examples of what we are currently doing to build, extend Copilot with plugins and connectors, and then I will bring it all together in a summarized way. Yes, I think I see a hand raised. Arun, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I see that the graph connector is kind of enabled. Right, so now where does this actually data say reside? So does this have a separate storage area that is being defined as part of the architecture, or how this plugins get integrated? So how an environment is created for each user or a set of users? So if you can cover on those lines as well, that will be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll answer your question a little bit down the line once we get into the details of how plugins and graph connectors work, right? I think that will somewhat answer your question, and then I will also come back to it. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah.
A
Thanks.
little bit technical. If we go into the details, not really technical, but more around how exactly plugins and graph connectors work, I think that will answer your question, right? For that, let's see a bunch of things that you can ask once you build a plugin or a graph connector, right? So this is an example of a skill that you teach Copilot. So you can have a project management plugin, you can have a bug management plugin, whatever it is. You can ask it to find you assign tickets which are of high priority, which are assigned to me, which need to be done within the next month. Whatever criteria that you have, you can search using that plugin. You might have an internal wiki data set of documents that is not on the M365 cloud. You can connect it using graph connector and then search on that wiki from a semantic way. You don't just do a keyword search. You ask it questions and then it does a semantic match, and understands the meaning of your question and comes up with the responses. And you can ask it question even if the wiki is in a completely is it in English, and one of your you might have employees who are cross world, and different employees ask questions in different languages. The semantic part, since LLMs work at a semantic level, they don't care whether the question is in English but the answer is in a different language, right? Like they are able to still match and then bring the response back to the user in whatever language that they've asked for. So that's a beauty of graph characters too. Uh, you have a bunch of options here, many of which our customers have already built. And I think you will be seeing the airline use case sometime down the line. I think Spandana is covering that. So with this, I want to take a quick demo of what it is that you can possibly do with plugins, right? Yes, I think I see Deepak's hand raised.
I hope you're going to cover how to develop and integrate the plugins with Copilot. The
Yes,
how part.
yes, we will be talking about the working of a plugin. We wouldn't be delving into the very technical details of how to build a plugin from a technical level, but I can
Mhm.
talk about it and how it works. I can definitely talk about it, and we can have a separate, session.
Session on
I
this.
session on this, and also I'll share with you the guidance on the technical details of how to build a
Yes,
plugin on the
yes,
chat as well.
that
So
will be very helpful. I mean, if you have some documents available which can help us kind of
absolutely.
create, see the benefits and the broader architecture. I mean, it's clear that what you are trying to give visibility to us. I mean, now it is more towards how to integrate
Yep,
uh, and use it with Copilot.
absolutely.
Absolutely, Deepak. We're actually already working with a few teams in your organization. But yeah, I can reach out and share more details on that.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks.
Harish.
Thanks.
So let me walk you through this example of something that Ernst Young built very recently. They had a requirement where they want to have a real-time view of unbilled inventory and unbilled invoices in their organization across different partners. It's a partnership firm, so they would want to keep a tab of how many unbilled invoices are there out there across different partners. That's kind of like how they operate from a revenue perspective as well, right? So that's something that they need a real-time view of, and typically they used to go through multiple different places, Excel, Power BI dashboards, and used to build reports on an ad hoc manner. But with plugin, this is what they did, right? Like they to get information, they had all this information in a database. So all they needed to do was ask Copilot what is the net unbilled invoices for the last etc days in Rosie. Rosie is the name of the plugin that they chose to name. So Copilot essentially uses this natural language query. So it is essentially understanding this natural language query real time. It is able to convert a form of an SQL query, and it is able to talk to a backend data and bring up the information that you see over here, right? So you have from the backend database, from wherever they have stored net and build invoices, Copilot is able to fetch the relevant information, bring it back in a neat format, tabled across different partners and the different, it can even do across different regions as well if you want to group it by regions and so on. So they are able to see the top unbilled invoices, and you have an adaptive card that comes up over here to show this view in a very quick summarized manner. You can also adaptive card buttons. I think you might all know how adaptive cards work. Clicking on a button, you have a pop-up where you can see more information. You can see the entire list of unbilled invoices over here in a more detailed view. In addition to that, if you want to see a little bit on the trend as well, you have another button for that. So this is something that EY wanted to have as a quick action here, but it completely depends on your scenario, what you would want as a quick action, right? They'd also want to delve into trends, not just asking for unbilled invoices. So that's also something that Copilot is able to synthesize from the backend database. It's able to understand across 0 to 30 days, 60 to 90, what are the different invoices that are available. And since they have plugin logic in such over here, right? Can create a dynamic chart on the go and give it back to the user, right? Like this was something that they had to manually do, drive a doc in an ad hoc fashion whenever the leadership wanted it. But now Copilot was able to give it in a matter of minutes. And the beauty of this is they can, if you see many of the terms over here, net unbilled invoices, NUI, that they talk over here is internal EY parlance. Like it's not a common knowledge for Copilot. So essentially, by building a plugin, you are teaching Copilot to talk to an external database, understand the internal, lingua of EY, and then use that understanding, use the database to actually give valuable information back to the end user. Yes, Deepak.
Satya, say in this case, you asked a query and the Copilot was able to kind of give answer to that specific query. Uh, my query is if I'm asking to give me the revenue breakup of various verticals, that's my state query. Okay, that's going to give me say A, B, C is the verticals and this is the revenue. Statistically, there could be other dimensions to that data. Is Copilot gonna kind of bring that recommendation to the user, or it will be dependent on the query again, which will be
Yeah.
fired by the user? I
So
mean, I'll take one more example. Say if I'm saying that give me the revenue breakup of A, B, C. Okay, then the recommendation should come out that a box and whiskers plot can be brought up, which gives a visibility of the range along with the mean and the median average, because this is what the leaders are gonna look for that data. So is that recommendation, I believe, comes out by default from Google, oh sorry, Copilot. The user doesn't have to kind of give these dimensions.
So I think at this point, I think it'd be good to understand a little bit on how this exactly works. Right? Like what you saw is kind of like the end user experience. What happens here when this gets done is essentially a plugin is a way to talk to an external database, like I mentioned. When a user asks a question to Copilot, Copilot determines it might have multiple plugins. You might have a plugin that you have created for CRM. You might have one you created for your ticketing agent. You might have multiple plugins. Depending on the intent of the user, it matches to one of the plugins that Copilot feels is the right plugin to answer your question. So there is a little bit of LLM magic going on over here. So depending on how you have described your plugin when you have built your plugin, the user's intent is matched to one of the plugins, and then that plugin is called. Once the plugin is called, essentially what happens is Copilot is opening a real-time window into a backend system. The plugin is the piece of code logic that you write, or ISV, whoever built the plugin, like for example in Jira, Atlassian would have written. So it's essentially a window that calls a REST API to an external system. This REST API could be to a CRM, it could be to a database, it could be to whatever external system that you'd want to link to. It could be to a patient database if you're a hospital, right? So essentially you are converting a very unstructured natural language query into a REST API call, right? So once you have the REST API call done and the responses are returned back to Copilot, depending on how the Copilot has an LLM, like I mentioned earlier, it has access to an LLM. So it can do simple manipulations of data. Like for example, you can ask it to give me the response in the form of a table. In this table, can you also let me know yes or no for certain column, depending on the value that you got from the REST API response. So it can do simple text manipulations on that. If you want to build complex charts out of the response, that's something that your logic will have to handle within the plugin that you built, right? So if you feel like certain type of information response would benefit from showing a bots and whiskers plot, then that's something that we will have to write in the plugin business logic, so that those responses, whenever Copilot detects, okay, this is the response that I'm getting, then it will probably be able to call a function which creates a bots and whiskers plot for that particular response. So that's the way it currently works now. And this is also because you might have noticed LLMs in general are great with language and text. It still struggles a little bit with the complex math, coming up with charts and so on. So that's a part that we still have to handhold a little bit at this point in time. Who knows, like when GPT-5 comes up and more LLM, advancements comes up, we can even give a simple prompt, create appropriate chart that will, help the user understand this information. Maybe that line would be enough in the future, but as of now, it needs to be a little bit more deterministic, right?
Okay, thanks, Satya, for your detailed response. Appreciate that. Thanks.
I think I see another hand, Ruksha.
Yeah, so extensive to a deeper question basically. Now, as per my understanding, this Copilot has a multiple plugin based on the question. It identify the plugin, then we call the backend service, right? So it might possible that the information that the user is looking for, it might be sitting in the multiple tables.
Mhm.
So how that uh, Copilot identify, okay, we have to join these tables and get the detail. Uh,
Oh, okay, multiple different tables. Got
yeah.
it. So Copilot does not really know the different tables and all that. You can actually you can actually build the plugin so you surface the table itself to the Copilot, or it's typically you have a couple of approaches to do this, right? One, you can give, hey, this is what my table structure is. I have 1, 2, 3 tables. Each table has these many columns, and each table talks about this. This is the information in table 1, 2, 3. I'm giving all the tables information to you, and this is what the question is. Create me an SQL query, right? That's one thing that you can do. So you're giving everything to Copilot to ask you to do the creation of SQL query itself. In that case, since it has the schema and everything, it will be able to create SQL queries. But however, currently with the state of LLMs right now, your SQL queries could be accurate, but if it's very complex queries with a lot of joins, with a lot of calculated columns and so on, the queries might not be accurate as well. So that's something that we do not typically recommend having Copilot itself create a query. What you can do instead is you have an API where you have a set of queries that you can perform, where you have a way to convert parameters, REST API call to an SQL query. Most of the modern database structures like Azure SQL, all of them have a REST API endpoint. You call the REST API, it converts into an SQL query and queries the database and brings back the responses, right? So that's possible in many of the modern databases right now. So think of plugins as a way to pick an external item from some place and bring it into the fold of an LLM, right? That's the way to think about it right now. We are coming up with more ways to kind of even do handover to an external agent. Like you might have an AI agent which is brilliant at creating SQL queries. So you might want to have Copilot hand over the responsibility of creating SQL query to the external agent and then wait for that to complete and then Copilot resumes. That is a possibility, that is a scenario that we are working on as well. So when that comes up, you can work on more complicated queries with multiple joins too. I see one more hand up.
Yeah, and we have
Harish, do
one
we
more
have?
from,
Yeah.
maybe this might be the last one because we have content to cover. Mohan, we see your hand up. Feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, I've done that. Are you able to hear me? Yep.
Yeah, we can.
Yes. Thanks, Shraddha. So basically, in previous answer, you mentioned IHG. So since Copilot is completely on over the cloud and it's passed data to Copilot as well as other services or the plugin we used. So so assume that we are a part of one project where we have to convey the IG team how this tool is I mean there won't be any concern about data governance or how this tool is compliance. So what are the, I mean, is there any document or any things we can refer here and share, and that can be shared with the IG team to get the go ahead from them.
Harish, I think, would you want to take this up, or if you have a Copilot C as a team?
Trying to see who from Copilot is on the call here. But Mohan, I can take this offline. No, thanks for your question though. I'll reach out to you directly. Yeah,
Okay, great.
sorry,
Thanks.
we just have to get back. There's plenty to
No,
cover, and we've got
thanks.
about 40-ish minutes left.
Don't worry, I think we have around like 50 documents for you. You can show comfortably. It's just that, yeah, we want this to be focused on the
I mean, this question
extensibility
is
part of it.
mostly,
Yeah.
yes.
No, I think security is definitely a huge topic and it deserves its own session in its merit. That's why I think we wanted to focus a little bit on the extensibility, how we can extend it. And security is definitely a valid thing that you would want to ask, and we can take it up separately. I think Harish might even be able to post something on the chat if possible, or follow up later on as well.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Thanks.
Sure, thanks.
Awesome. I also want to sample, right? Like, and this is a sample that's available on. I would want you to all take a look at that sample as well. And if you have developers, you have free time, feel free to set it up in your own tenant and see. This is a very interesting sample. You have an inventory system. Imagine you have an inventory system in the backend, and you'd want to ask questions about that inventory system from Copilot, right? So in this case, there is a Northwind inventory system which has inventory on different products. It's a retail store. So it has inventory on different products that you sell in a typical retail store, and they would want to check which are currently low in stock because there is an upcoming sale season coming up. So they'd want to replenish the stock, and they would want to generate a report generate a report to the supplier on things that are low in stock. And if you see this part, right, and I want to add a column to show using tick emoji, right, for products with the compliance level is not there. Like basically the reorder level is not compliant. with the org's complaint policy, right? Pay very close attention to this part. So I think this comes to, I think this answers one of the questions that was asked earlier. You see here, the response here goes through all of the different points that I mentioned over here. First, it calls the plugin to get the items which are low in stock. So these are the items and these are the suppliers, and this is the units in stock that are currently there. So it brings up the items which are low in stock for that particular product. And then it also says the reorder level. Now, if you see with the emoji that we have provided, it has taken that as a queue and it is formatted in the way that we want. Like this was not programmed or coded anywhere. Some other user might want it to be represented in a different way, and LLM will be able to process it in a different way, right? So you have some flexibility, freedom on how you'd want to interpret the response that you get back from the database. Like this is what I think we talked about from a charting perspective as well. As of now, you can do language manipulations. I'm sure like once the LLM gets really strong at math, you can even ask, I want this to be in a certain bar chart or pie chart, and Copilot will be able to build it dynamically for you, right? But as of now, right, like what you see here is not just talking to a database in real time and bringing back this information, it is also able to talk to a Word document, which is basically the MOQ policy at Northwind, and compare that Word document in real time to the reorder level and bring up that information and compare it with the database table. So it did two different things. One, it took the database content, and two, it took a Word document and compared the information in both to see if the reorder level is compliant with the MOQ policy, right? And I think this is, we have a public YouTube video where it talks about this. I have the reference for that as well. So essentially, if you click on the reference over here, right, that you see in here, you come to here where there is a Word document called as Northwind Minimum Order Quantity Policy. And this is not even something that was referred to in the original prompt. Copilot knew that there is somewhere in my semantic index that talks about the minimum order quantity, and that's what the user is referring to. So it was able to get that Word document and compare it with the information that it got from database and provide you with one single view. So this is an example of what I mentioned earlier. It's not just one system. Copilot kind of like creates a plan when you ask a question. Okay, I need to first do this. Then I need to compare it with something that I knew from my knowledge. Then I need to summarize this answer for the user. So it's almost thinking like a intern or a human that you have in your team who does all this, kind of like planning for a simple question, or probably in this case, a loaded question that you might have. Uh, some other things that you can ask the same inventory database is basically you can ask it to, give me the reorder levels and so on. And once it gets the response, okay, same one, yeah. So what I wanted to show, another powerful feature in Copilot plugins as well, is essentially once you ask a question, it comes back with a bunch of responses. That's great. You are able to get a summarized view. But if you notice the references over here, right, you can hover over them to see where exactly it got this information from. These are received from graph connectors. These PDF files are ingested using graph connectors. And you might have some references which resolve into adaptive cuts, right? Like Deep showed earlier from a Jira adaptive card, you could update the Jira ticket and issue. You can assign the Jira ticket to someone else. Whereas in this adaptive card, you can see information on what inventory product is available, what is the price and whatnot, blah, blah. Like typically what you would need in a retail context. And if you feel like something is low in stock, you can actually update the stock, restock it. All of that workflows that you'd want to do, you can do directly from here. So with a single click of a button, they can do a restock level, and they can even draft an email to the supplier. Hey, I made a restock for this. Could you send this ASAP kind of thing? You can do a draft of an email to the supplier right at this point. And Copilot will be able to do this. The beauty of this is none of this is coded. Since it's all out of box Copilot magic, you don't have to code anything in regards to drafting an email, in regards to representing it in a certain format. All you need to do is give it a REST API for it to talk to your backend database. The rest of it is LLM magic, right? At this point in time, you see just the copy button over here, but we are expanding it to have a button called Edit in Outlook. where at this point in time, the drafted email, when you click on edit in Outlook, will open in Outlook and it will hand it over to Outlook's Copilot. Right? Uh, so we covered plugins and we talked a little bit on graph connectors as well. I spoke about plugins as a kind of like a real-time way to open a window using REST API. Graph connectors differ from plugins in the sense where we had PDF files that showed up earlier, right? Graph connectors are slightly different in the way it works. It's not real time. Like essentially, uh, graph connectors are kind of like creating a funnel, creating a pipeline with an external world, and you determine what is the frequency of update. You determine how frequently, what interval you would want to make a copy of the external data. So essentially, graph connector will create a pipeline to make a copy of your external data and bring it into the semantic index, bring it into the Microsoft 365 Cloud. I think this was a question that was asked earlier. Uh, Plugins, since it works directly with an external database, there's no storage involved, right? Like it talks to an external system, it just brings a response back. So it's all a real-time transient, calls back and forth using a REST API. There is nothing stored anywhere unless you build it in your logic. Whereas graph connectors, it makes a copy of your external data into your semantic index. So there is a storage involved over there in your M365 Cloud. We can share documentation on what that storage is, what that's going to look like, and so on. So there is a storage that gets made with graph connectors. That is an important point to know. So you are not working with data, real-time data in an external database. You are working with the copied data.
And which is better with structured and unstructured data, Satya?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with structured data that you have, when I say structured data, I'm talking about things like tables, things that are more organized. So plugins are more useful or more accurate over there. The reason being, you would be able to control how you call the REST API. You can do filtering on it. All of that is something that you have control over. Whereas with graph connectors, it's it's fantastic over unstructured documents. So things that are a bunch of paragraphs, like policy documents that you have, things that are put together as a bunch of paragraphs in a text document, in a Word document, in a PowerPoint, whatever it is, that needs to be indexed so that there is a semantic meaning captured somewhere. So graph connector search works with a semantic match kind of like a principle, right? As opposed to plugin search, which is more of a deterministic REST API call, right? Like when you ask a question to a graph connector or to Copilot, and Copilot chooses a graph connector to answer it, it essentially does a semantic merge of your query to the graph connector information, and so it works better when you have an unstructured content over there. Right? And this diagram kind of like captures this really well. So plugins, real time, graph connectors, connects to third-party sources. It's not real time. It makes a copy, and it is fantastic over unstructured content. This is a very good view, and we'll be able to share this with you also post this call. So this is a very good view of how and when you should choose which option, right? So like I said, real time and determined by sync, that brings the data freshness quality into your equation. So when you have information, when you want to talk to an external system and you feel like that system is going to change very frequently, think of ticketing systems, think of dashboards where you want to check numbers, that's going to change every day, every few minutes, every few seconds, even if you are creating a plugin to check out stock information, for example, right? So those kind of things where you would want to always have access to real-time information, and that information is going to change a lot. Plugin is probably like an ideal way to do that because it talks directly to the backend in real time. Graph connectors are more suitable for content which do not change a lot over a period of time. If it changes once in 3 months, once in 6 months, or even once in a month, it's okay. You can do a monthly refresh schedule pull using graph connectors. These are suitable for, say, HR policy documents that you'd want to bring into semantic index, or some kind of like a docs knowledge information, onboarding information that you might have for new hires. All of this documents that you don't typically expect to change like every few minutes or every few hours or something, that's something that graph connectors are probably like more suited for. Again, this is not like a, if I have static then graph connector. It's not like a binary 1 or 0. You have to consider all of these points in order to choose one over the other, or in some cases you might even choose to go with both. Yes, Anil, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. You said that in graph connectors, you need to get the data and store it in M365. Is there any considerations from the storage requirement perspective, whether it is, how is the storage going to come in? Are there any databases required, structured, non-structured? How is the data storage and the data storage licenses
So
required?
yeah. So storage, in the sense, you don't directly control the storage. You don't create a database or anything of that sort. You set up a graph connector to ingest information from an external system. What happens when you ingest is it creates a semantic vectors. So basically, it creates a vectors of your system, and then it stores within the semantic index. So you don't typically have control over, I need to store it here, there, and all that. So you can just mention the content that you would want to index, and you can mention the frequency of index, and you can probably add, you can definitely add authentication. Like, I want certain content to be viewed by these many people, or this is the level of access for certain groups and so on. So you can mention the auth controls over there, or access controls over there. But that's about it. In terms of how it gets stored, all of that is taken care by graph connectors internal logic. There is a storage element cost associated with it. I think there is a good documentation on that we can share with you, that talks about if you have million items that you are indexing, this is how much the storage would be for a million items. So there is a kind of like a calculation table that's there that you can refer to. So you can use that to determine, okay, if I have these many items, if I have X number of documents, so this is how my storage requirements would be. So that's something that you can use that to do the calculation. Yes, Amit.
So when we're talking about the graph connector storing the data, right? I mean, are we also talking about the metadata, which is again in line with the data which is being stored? So user one may have, I mean, access to, let's say, six knowledge base out of 10, and the user two might have only 4 or let's say 8, right? So I mean, are we also storing those kind of metadata along with the data that we are storing?
Metadata for user access, is it like
Yeah,
for
it's just
how?
a one case I'm talking about. Let's say the user case for now.
Got it. So you can determine which data or metadata gets indexed. So depending on that, it will create an accurate semantic representation within the index as well. Authentication is taken care of automatically if your system that you are trying to index is AAD authenticated. So it will kind of like try to duplicate whatever authentication layer that you have built over there into this one as well. If it's a custom IDP that authentication that you have built in, then you will, there is additional steps of you configuring how or which items should be visible for or accessible for certain set of folks. That's an additional step that you will have to do. But essentially, that's how authentication works. So I would probably separate auth away from metadata. When you say metadata, things like say if I'm taking a proposal, but you have a bunch of HR policy documents, for example, right?
Yeah.
These documents are for India regions. These documents are for UK regions, right? So those are metadata for documents. So those kind of things you can absolutely mention when you're indexing.
So while training this and while uploading the data in the beginning, I mean, the semantic parsing will, I mean, take care of all those aspects as well.
Yes. You can determine. You can add that the metadata as one of the things that you need to index on. Yes.
So yeah, I mean, probably not for now, but I think I would like to cover in later sessions. I mean, where we talk about the changes, right? Because again, there is a sync aligned to it. Let's say a user changing. I mean, in this case, as you said, moving from India to, let's say, Europe region. I mean, the change in a policy. How do we ensure the sync policy and we don't, I mean, get answer obsolete responses, which is again something changed after moving to different regions. Just in case I'm playing. Yeah.
Got it. Oh, at that case, the graph content need not change because the backend still remains the same. The information content remains the same. If you remember the earlier diagram that I showed, when that user starts talking with Copilot, and Copilot first refers to graph to determine who that user is. At that point in time, Copilot will know, okay, this person has moved to UK, so I should probably check the semantic index for tagged with that thing, right? Like, so that's how. So
the grounding
gets taken
part,
care
I
of
mean,
in
take care of
yeah,
that is what you're
the
saying.
pre-processing
Understood.
step is what comes into play over there. Yes.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, Satya, just on a time check, I'll probably give you a couple of more minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll quickly go into the summary of this. So essentially, you have permissions management also, like I mentioned, plugins. You have it in the code. Graph connectors. It is set up when you're setting it up. You manage the permissions. Read or write. Since I think that's a very important thing that we need to cover. From a read or write perspective, since plugins interact real time with an external system, you can also update an external system. For example, in Jira ticket, you assign it to someone else. You close it. In the Northwind stock, you updated the stock. So those are things that you do real time. You can update systems as well. Whereas with Graph Connector, since you are working with a copy of the external data, it doesn't make sense to update it. You're updating a copy, so that doesn't make sense. So it's only read only. It's more useful for read only scenarios. So those are very some of the top important considerations. The others are more of self-explanatory. We'll share the slides. So if you have any questions, please post on the chat as well, and I can take it up. I think, let me just check if I have missed anything else. Oh yeah, it's just a takeaway slide. If I have to summarize this very quickly, Harish, in 30 seconds. M365 Copilot is essentially your AI chat assistant. Think of it's a very powerful assistant which has certain information and certain set of skills to make it your own, to make it even more powerful. Extensibility is key. And if you want to extend what it can do, go with plugins. If you want to extend what it knows, go with graph connectors. And with that, handing over back to you, Harish.
Thank you, Satya.